Most people think the retirement question is, how much money do I need? That is too small. The real question is, how do I turn what I have into income I can trust when I am no longer young enough, strong enough, or lucky enough to keep repairing mistakes with more labor? That is the real problem. Not the pile, the paycheck, not what you own on the day you retire, what your money can continue doing after your body stops wanting to negotiate with alarm clocks, deadlines, blood pressure, and the emotional cost of working because you still have to, not because you still want to. That is why I care so much about the retirement income question. $1 million sounds like wealth when you are still accumulating it. It sounds very different when you sit down at 65 and realize you are no longer trying to make the number look impressive. You are trying to make it behave. You are trying to turn a pile into a stream. You are trying to convert a balance into a paycheck. And that is one of the hardest conversions in finance because numbers feel static, but retirement is not static at all. Retirement is time, it is uncertainty, it is longevity, it is inflation, it is sequence risk. It is the possibility that you live much longer than your nerves expected, that markets disappoint earlier than your spreadsheet expected, and that your spending does not obey the neat assumptions people use in conference rooms. That is the real challenge. Now, when most people ask how much they can spend from a retirement portfolio, they are really asking for a withdrawal rate, 3%, 4%, 5%, something like that. And those conversations are useful up to a point. But they are also incomplete because a withdrawal rate tells you something about arithmetic. While retirement is a problem of arithmetic plus psychology plus structure, and structure matters more than almost anyone admits. This is why the annuity question keeps returning, no matter how much people want to simplify retirement into a war between keep control and buy certainty. I have no interest in culture wars around products. I am not pro-annuity in some religious sense. I am not anti-annuity in some ideological sense. I am pro-understanding. And if you really understand retirement, then you understand something very quickly. There are only two broad ways to fund life after work. Either your portfolio remains the main worker, or you use some of your capital to buy income guarantees that reduce how hard the portfolio has to work. That is the whole story. Everything else is decoration. And once you understand that, you stop asking childish questions like, which one is best? The better question is much more serious. Which structure leaves my life less fragile? That is the adult question, because retirement is not won by elegance, it is won by durability. Let us begin with the traditional structure, because it is the one most people understand emotionally. A married couple retires at 65 with $1 million invested. One spouse receives $2,500 a month in Social Security. The other receives $1,250 a month. Together, that is $45,000 a year of guaranteed income. They want to spend $95,000 a year, so the portfolio must fill a $50,000 gap. That means the portfolio starts at a 5% withdrawal rate. Now, in today's internet culture, the phrase 5% withdrawal rate can make people either far too excited or far too frightened. I think both reactions are shallow. A 5% starting withdrawal rate is not automatically reckless, nor is it automatically safe. It depends on the whole structure around it. And here the structure matters. This couple is not drawing the entire $95,000 from the portfolio. They already have a strong guaranteed floor from Social Security. That floor does a lot of hidden work. It means the market does not have to carry the whole retirement on its back. It means some of the spending is immune to portfolio fluctuations. It means the withdrawal pressure is lower than it would be for a household whose entire retirement depended on one investment account and a prayer. That matters enormously. People tend to underestimate how powerful Social Security is in retirement design because it feels ordinary. But ordinary guaranteed income is often the difference between a fragile plan and a survivable one. It reduces the size of the gap. And in retirement, the gap is the whole game. So if this couple needs $50,000 a year from $1 million portfolio, then at least in theory, with a real return of 5.5%, the portfolio can still grow while supplying the income. That is one of the most misunderstood truths in retirement. A retiree does not need a portfolio that grows faster than zero. He needs a portfolio that grows faster than what he is taking out. That is a different threshold. And when the portfolio clears that threshold, something beautiful can happen. The retiree can spend substantial real dollars each year and still watch the account survive or even expand. That is the classical dream of retirement planning, to take out a meaningful income while preserving the engine. And under the assumptions in the source material, that is exactly what happens. By age 70, the account can still be a little over $1 million. By age 80, still around the same general neighborhood. By age 90, perhaps even higher. Over 25 years, the couple can draw roughly $1.25 million to $1.3 million from the portfolio and still end near where they started or better. That sounds almost magical until you remember what is actually doing the work, not magic. The spread between the portfolio's real growth rate and the amount withdrawn. That spread is what determines whether the machine survives. And that is why I say the portfolio-only framework is not foolish at all. For many retirees, it works perfectly well, but only if they understand the burden they are placing on the portfolio. The burden is not just mathematical, it is psychological. If the portfolio is funding a very large share of life, then every market decline feels personal. Every correction feels like a threat to groceries, to travel, to gifts for grandchildren, to the sense of control. That is where sequence risk becomes more than a textbook idea. People love talking about average return. Retirement is not lived in average return, it is lived in order. If poor returns show up early while the withdrawals are already flowing out, the portfolio is being asked to heal while bleeding. That is the danger. Not that the long-term average disappoints, that the bad years come first. That is why two portfolios with the same long-term average can produce very different retirements. The order matters, and the more the retiree depends on the portfolio to pay the bills, the more cruel that order can become. This is where guaranteed lifetime income enters the conversation. Not as a miracle, as a transfer burden. That is the right way to think about an annuity. You are not buying perfection. You are not buying high returns. You are buying burden transfer. You are paying an institution to take some longevity risk and some market risk off your own balance sheet. That is what a single premium immediate annuity really is. You hand over a lump sum, the insurer hands back a contract, and that contract says, in one form or another, we will keep sending you income under these terms for as long as this arrangement promises. That is the bargain. Now, people either love this or hate it because they are usually focusing on one emotion at a time. The control people hate it because money leaves their hands. The certainty people love it because checks keep arriving. Both sides are seeing something true. And that is why this decision is so hard, because the trade is real. You are trading flexibility for certainty. You are trading liquidity for predictability. You are trading some inheritance optionality for a stronger income floor. That is not a trick. That is the whole contract. In the source material, the annuity example is clean enough to be useful. The same couple at 65 takes $400,000 of the $1 million and buys a single premium immediate fixed annuity with a cash refund feature. That cash refund matters because it softens one of the hardest emotional objections if they die before receiving back at least what they paid in. The unused principal value can go to heirs. That feature lowers the payout somewhat compared with a pure life-only structure, but it gives the family a different emotional shape to the decision, and emotion matters. Money that fails emotionally is often money that fails behaviorally. Under the source assumptions, that $400,000 annuity pays around $2,300 a month, or about $27,600 a year. Add that to the $45,000 of Social Security, and now the couple has $72,600 of guaranteed annual income before the market is asked to do anything at all. That changes everything. Now the spending target of $95,000 leaves only a $22,400 gap for the remaining portfolio to fill. And the remaining portfolio is now $600,000. That means the withdrawal pressure on the investment portfolio falls dramatically. This is the key point. The annuity does not magically make the couple wealthier. What it does is change the shape of the strain. The portfolio no longer has to serve as the primary paycheck machine. It becomes a secondary support engine. And once that happens, The retiree may be able to invest the remaining portfolio more aggressively than before because the survival of the household is no longer as dependent on monthly market mood. This is one of the strongest arguments for guaranteed income that many critics refuse to admit. A strong income floor does not merely reduce fear. It changes the role of the rest of the capital, and role is everything in portfolio design. A portfolio that must feed the whole house behaves differently from a portfolio that only has to fill a smaller gap. The first portfolio must be more careful. The second portfolio can often afford to be more patient. That is why the source assumes the remaining $600,000 can target a 7% real return instead of 5.5%. Again, this is not because the laws of mathematics change. It is because the household can tolerate more volatility when the floor under life is thicker. That is a crucial idea. Risk tolerance is not only personality, it is also structure. A couple with high guaranteed income can carry more portfolio risk because their spending needs are already largely covered. A couple with weak guaranteed income may feel forced into lower risk investing because any severe drawdown threatens the core standard of living. Same people, same market, different structure, different emotional truth. And under the source assumptions, the hybrid strategy becomes extremely powerful over time. The annuity pays $27,600 a year over 25 years. That is about $690,000 of income. The Social Security keeps paying too, adding another very large stream over the same period. Meanwhile, the $600,000 remaining portfolio only has to provide $22,400 a year. Still has room to grow substantially if returns cooperate by age 90 under those assumptions. It can approach or exceed $1.8 million. This is the part that shocks people. They think buying an annuity automatically destroys legacy. Not necessarily. It can reduce flexibility and can reduce estate value if death comes early. Yes, but in some structures, by lowering portfolio strain so much, the annuity can allow the remaining investments to compound more aggressively and more successfully over time. That is the paradox. The product many people view as anti-growth can, under the right structure, indirectly help preserve or even expand the long-term portfolio because it reduces the spending pressure that would otherwise drag more heavily on the investment account. That is why simplistic annuity hatred is just as foolish as simplistic annuity worship. This is not theology, this is engineering, and the engineering depends on what the income floor is doing to the rest of the machine. Now, I want to pause here because this is where most people begin making the wrong comparison. They compare the annuity and the portfolio as though both are trying to do the same job. They are not. The annuity is buying certainty, the portfolio is buying flexibility and long-term optional upside. You should never compare them as though only one of them has value. They have different value. That is what makes the trade difficult. If you keep everything in the portfolio, you keep control, you keep liquidity, you keep the ability to draw more in an emergency, you keep the possibility that if the market behaves beautifully and you die earlier than expected, your heirs inherit a larger untouched pool. Those are real advantages. Do not let any salesman tell you otherwise. Control matters, liquidity matters, legacy matters, but that freedom comes with a cost. The portfolio must carry more of the retirement burden. And if markets disappoint early, or if you live longer than average, or if inflation and spending pressure combine badly, then all of that flexibility begins feeling much heavier. That is the hidden cost of keeping everything liquid. The liquid portfolio must keep solving every future problem. That is a lot to ask of one machine. If you annuitize a portion, you give up some of that freedom. You cannot wake up one morning and decide you would like the lump sum back. That portion is gone from your direct control. You exchanged a chunk of your wealth for a stream. That is why some people hate annuities viscerally. They are not wrong to feel the loss of control. It is real. But they often ignore the thing they gained, a stronger floor. A floor means you do not have to wake up every year wondering how much the market will let you spend. A floor means that if markets become ugly, you still know a substantial piece of your life is funded. A floor means the portfolio can become more patient. A floor means you are no longer fully exposed to the timing of bad returns. That matters far more in the later decades of retirement than most younger commentators are emotionally capable of understanding. They are still thinking like accumulators. Retirement is not accumulation. It is not a contest to maximize ending wealth at all costs. It is an exercise in survivability. That is the word I care about most here. Survivability. Does the structure leave the retiree exposed to one bad sequence, one terrifying bear market, one long period of weak returns, one surprisingly long lifespan, or does it thicken the floor enough that even bad weather feels survivable? This is why I think the strongest income floor often creates the strongest retirement, not always the richest. That is different. The strongest, strong enough to sleep, strong enough to keep dignity, strong enough to avoid the emotional humiliation of having to recalculate whether you can still live your life every time the market has a bad year. That is worth a great deal. Still, I do not want to oversell certainty. Guaranteed income is never free in an economic sense. You pay for it through reduced liquidity and often through lower expected upside on that capital. You also pay for it through the possibility that an early death makes the trade look, in hindsight, less attractive for heirs. Even with a refund feature, the path of inheritance will look different than it would have if the money had simply stayed invested. Again, that does not make the annuity wrong. It means the couple must know what they are purchasing. That is where I think many retirees make their biggest mistake. They purchase products they cannot describe. Never do that. If you cannot explain in a simple sentence what a product takes from you and what it gives back, you have no business owning it. A single premium immediate annuity is actually fairly simple compared with many financial products. It takes a lump sum, it gives back guaranteed payments, extra guarantees lower the payout. Life only pays more because the insurer keeps any remainder at death, refund, and period. Certain features pay less because the insurer carries more obligation. Higher interest rates usually improve payout levels. Older buyers usually get higher payouts because the insurer expects fewer years of payment. That is the structure. It is not mysterious. The mystery usually comes from people refusing to admit the core trade. Now, if you ask me where annuities make the most sense, the answer is not always. They make the most sense where the retiree values certainty highly, has a meaningful spending gap to cover, does not want the portfolio carrying all of the longevity risk, and is willing to surrender some liquidity to strengthen the floor. That is where the product belongs. They make less sense when the retiree already has a large pension, does not need more guaranteed floor, prizes liquidity above almost everything, or has legacy goals so strong that exchanging capital for income feels like a violation of the whole purpose of the savings. That is also fair. Different households want different things from the same pool of money. One wants maximum flexibility. Another wants minimum anxiety. One wants to leave the largest estate possible. Another wants to maximize the chance that neither spouse ever has to fear outliving income. These are not the same goal. That is why I say there is no universally correct answer here. But there are absolutely wrong ways to think about the problem. One wrong way is to think only in terms of return. Retirement is not only about return, it is about structure. Another wrong way is to think only in terms of product reputation. Some people hear annuity and mentally shut down. That is just as unhelpful as hearing guaranteed income and assuming the product must be wise. Bad products exist. Good uses of products exist. You must separate wrapper from purpose. A third wrong way is to ignore inflation. This matters because in the source example, the annuity payment is fixed. That means the annuity does not inflate with time. Social Security has some inflation linkage. Portfolio withdrawals can be increased if the portfolio allows it, but a fixed annuity check is a nominal check. That means over 25 years, its real purchasing power will fall. People must understand that. The floor is stronger in one sense and weaker in another. It is stronger because it is guaranteed. It is weaker because it does not rise naturally with the cost of living unless you buy an inflation adjusted structure, which typically starts with a noticeably lower payment. Again, that is the trade. People keep wanting retirement products without trade-offs. There are none. Everything has a price. The question is whether the price buys something you genuinely need. This is why I often think the real retirement decision is not portfolio versus annuity. That is too crude. The real decision is how much certainty you want to buy, how much control you refuse to surrender, and which risk frightens you more. Do you fear dying early and leaving too little unspent capital to heirs? Or do you fear living very long and depending too heavily on a market portfolio to keep solving the problem? Both fears are legitimate. That is why retirement is such a profound financial problem. It is not a spreadsheet puzzle alone. It is a problem of identity, family, control, mortality, and uncertainty. The products simply translate those fears into structure, and the structure you choose determines how retirement feels if everything stays in the portfolio. Retirement may feel freer in good markets and more stressful in bad ones. If part of the wealth is annuitized, retirement may feel less flexible but often steadier. This is what the source means when it says the strongest income floors tend to create more secure retirements. I think that is true, but security is not the only value in life. Some people would gladly accept more variability to preserve more control. Fine. The error comes when they make that choice unconsciously. I never want retirees making unconscious choices. If you choose flexibility, admit the price of flexibility. If you choose certainty, admit the price of certainty. Then at least you are dealing honestly with your own life. Now let me tell you what I think the cleanest framework is. Start with spending, not fantasy spending, actual spending. Then subtract the truly durable income floors you already have, Social Security, pensions, any other reliable income. What remains is the real gap. Once you know the real gap, then you ask how much of that gap you want covered by guarantees and how much of it you are comfortable leaving to markets. That is the decision, not whether annuities are good, not whether portfolios are better. How much of your life do you want contractually funded and how much of it do you want market funded? That is the adult version of the problem. And the answer can be different for equally intelligent households. That is why conversation matters so much. The source is right about that. Not sales pressure conversation. The wrong annuity sold to the wrong retiree is a burden. The right annuity used in the right structure can be a relief. The wrong all-portfolio strategy can leave a household far more exposed than they emotionally understand. The right all-portfolio strategy can preserve freedom and legacy beautifully if the household has the stomach flexibility and guarantees elsewhere to support it. This is why I dislike one-size-fits-all retirement religion. Retirement is too intimate for slogans. So here is the clearest way I know to say it. A portfolio, only retirement can work wonderfully when the guaranteed income floor is already strong enough and the household is comfortable with market dependence. A hybrid structure with an annuity can work wonderfully when the household wants to reduce portfolio pressure, strengthen the floor, and buy peace against longevity and sequence risk. Neither is always right. Neither is always wrong. But one thing is always true. The stronger your floor, the less fragile your retirement feels. And fragility is what destroys people, not because it always destroys the portfolio mathematically, because it destroys their confidence in the plan. Once confidence breaks, behavior breaks. Once behavior breaks, even good math can fail. That is why I care so much about the floor, not because it is glamorous, because it keeps the human being attached to the plan. And in retirement, that may be the most valuable thing of all. You do not need the perfect answer. You need the structure that lets you live your retirement without your heart rate becoming a referendum on the last quarter as returns. That is the decision, not what is mathematically pure, what is strong enough to last as long as you do, and calm enough that you can actually live inside it. That is the only standard that matters to me.